So tonight I have the pleasure of introducing our presenters, Dr. Robin Stern, Catherine Lee, and Elisa Ladati. And team, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thanks so much, Erin, and thank you and welcome to everyone who's here. Coming out even on Zoom during prime time is quite a feat when you're a parent, so we really appreciate you showing up. I'm Robin Stern. I'm the co-founder and associate director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. I'm a psychoanalyst in private practice and the mother of 2 adult children, and I can promise that even when they're not living with you, you are very much the parent. And I came to this work after years of being a psychoanalyst, realizing that insight alone was not enough and that people need skills. And so I looked for people working at the intersection of education and psychology to teach skills from the earliest ages on. And I'm thrilled to be here with Catherine Lee and Elisa Ladati. Catherine, tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. So my name is Catherine Lee, and I direct our efforts to engage families in rural, at rural schools, and involves lots of different kinds of responsibilities at the center. And my background is my education is in human development, and most of my experience has been in schools. So I've been in the field of education for probably close to 30 years before I came to the center. Primarily from California, which is where I'm from, and of all the things that I've done in education, I'd say by far the most challenging and rewarding job that I've had is raising my child, who's 29 now and lives in Los Angeles.
Thank you, Catherine.
And Elisa.
And my name is Elisa Ladati. I am the program manager for Ruler for Families and Partner Schools. And I have the pleasure of working with Catherine and Robin to develop resources for families to enhance their own skills of emotional intelligence and support their children in doing the same. And we'll talk more about those resources tonight. I am a school psychologist by training. And it's been a major part of my professional life is partnering with families to support children. And I'm coming to you live from my basement office / playroom. I'm the mom of 2 young boys, a first grader and a preschooler.
So that's a little bit about us, and here's what we heard a little bit about you. We wanted to know, as Erin said, what you wanted to hear tonight. And so we asked you, and what you told us was that you wanted to hear a little bit about how to maintain and enhance relationships during this time where we're socially distant, where many of us are living with each other all the time in circumstances that are very unusual, and how to make the most of those relationships. How to have greater well-being, both physically and mentally. How to practice mindfulness. Many of you wanted to know how to do that. How can parents suddenly be teachers? And what are the challenges that come along with that? And how to deal with the stress of virtual education and virtual working and suddenly being a teacher. And how to deal with the stress of living through this very difficult time. So we hope that you will get the answers to many of these questions. And following the webinar, we'll be sending you resources and a tip sheet. So look for that somewhere down the road. We'll be preparing it as soon as we can after this webinar is over. But we promise to send it to you. One of the things that we love to do at the Center for Emotional Intelligence is to ask you how you're feeling. So here's how I'd like to do that tonight. Tell us about yourself tonight by telling us what feelings did you give yourself the permission to feel today? What are the feelings you allowed today? Tell us in the chat room. I'll go first. I allowed myself the feelings of impatience. I allowed myself the feelings of anxiety. I allowed myself the feeling of gratitude working with my amazing team, Catherine and Elisa, coming together with them to be moms together and to talk to moms and dads and grandparents. Frustration, thank you. Feeling lonely and tired, many of us. Energized and inspired, freedom from a schedule. Happy and overwhelmed, driven, frustrated, sadness, frustrated, lots of irritation, overwhelmed, angry. So we know, thank you all. Keep coming, keep telling us. We want to hear from you. And I'll just talk as you're typing. We know that we're a little bit out of balance right now. And for those of you who have been to some of our other webinars, you know that we talk a lot about that. How can we right that balance? How can we spend a little bit more time having pleasant feelings and a little bit less time having unpleasant feelings at a time when we're overwhelmed with news and demands and constraints from the environment that really cause those unpleasant feelings to happen. So part of what we're going to do tonight is to talk about what we can do about the roller coaster of emotions that we're all having every single day. And we know from our decades of research that our emotions impact our ability to stay focused, to make good decisions, to have healthy relationships. For those of you who asked about the ruler approach, this is part of it. Knowing that emotions matter and that they impact the ability to pay attention and focus, the ability to make good decisions, the ability to have healthy relationships, well-being and creativity. And we all have emotions. And right now, those emotions are largely, as I said, in unpleasant places much of the time. And why is that? Because things are unpredictable and out of our control, and we don't know when some of these challenges are going to end. And what are those challenges? I'm sure you could name them if I didn't first. The pandemics, COVID-19, the economic crisis that way too many of us are living through, racial unrest and injustice, trying to right that, trying to live in a world where everyone feels valued and where there's no such thing as prejudice and bias. We're living with natural disasters, the fires in California, the hurricanes, and we're living, more to the point of this webinar, in a time where education is something we don't even recognize, because kids are not going to school full time anymore, or at least most of us are not living in that world. We're living in a world where some learning is virtual. We're living in a world where we're working in a virtual way. I'm coming from Long Island. Elisa is coming from, somebody's saying, don't forget the election. Yes, that's the other pandemic, living through the run up to the election, definitely. So Lisa's in Connecticut and Catherine's in Connecticut. So thank you for that prompt about the election, absolutely. So with these challenges, we want you to know that the way you're feeling is not just psychological. The stress is taking a toll on your bodies. It's not possible to be as effective in managing your feelings, even with the skills of emotional intelligence, when you're depleted, when you're exhausted, when you have headaches, when your heart is racing. It's just not possible. The skills of emotional intelligence, of recognizing and understanding and labeling and expressing and regulating your emotions, are the skills you need to be effective with your emotions, the emotions that are impacting you every single day on that roller coaster. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you can engage in self-care so that you have the basics of sleeping, eating, and moving, along with the basics of managing your emotions to counter the stress that's happening in your bodies and not just in your mind. And just to make that very alive for you, we decided to bring right from this morning's CBS News program a view of what this is like in schools. For those of you who haven't actually seen it, even if you are in a rural school, your kids are in a rural school, here's a clip that was on to the Today Show where Mark Brackett, our director and the author of Permission to Feel, where it all begins, where Mark talks about what's going on in the schools, and the kids will talk and tell you what they're experiencing as well. So here we go.
In our special series, School Matters, as parents work to keep their kids' education on track, many are also focusing on their children's mental health. The American Academy of Pediatrics says that since the start of the pandemic in March, 14% of parents reported worsening behavioral health for their kids. Across the country, 73% of school districts offer social and emotional learning programs, which have now been linked to improved behavior, relationships, and your grades, too. Dr. Tara Narula reports those programs may be needed now more than ever.
Take a deep breath.
Jet Home starts every school day with a mantra.
May I be happy.
Along with reading, writing, and math, Jet is learning about feelings. It's all part of something called Ruler, a curriculum used at 2,500 schools around the country.
All emotions affect our attentional capacity.
Mark Brackett developed the program at Yale University.
Emotions matter for everything. If we can't manage our feelings, it's hard to be creative, and it's hard to focus.
In his book, Permission to Feel, Brackett outlines 5 steps for mastering emotions: recognizing, understanding, labeling, expressing, regulating.
Emotions are a lot more complex than just being like, oh, like I'm happy right now or I'm sad.
The hardest part is recognizing how you feel.
Ruler uses a color-coded tool to help students identify their feelings. We asked students from New York's Lab School to show us how it works.
When I'm feeling red, I feel like an intense anger and frustration.
When I'm feeling yellow, I feel super happy and super energized.
Blue, sad and overwhelmed.
Green, tranquil and relaxed.
I Dream a World by Langston Hughes.
Because of the pandemic, Leslie Gill and her sister Lauren aren't able to practice the Ruler concepts as they usually do with their classmates.
You have to write about how you think the other person feels, so then you see the different perspectives, because you might be thinking that this person feels one way, but it's actually they feel like the opposite.
Excited, included.
It is very important for us to not assume how kids are feeling. We do that all the time. And what research shows is that we often make a lot of mistakes.
Why is social emotional learning so critical, particularly when we're living through a pandemic?
We're feeling the strongest emotions we might have ever had before. My research with children shows that they're frustrated, they're overwhelmed, they're anxious, they're bored, they're lonely.
Me and my brother will fight a lot, especially during quarantine. Stepping back and thinking about what I'm saying and how I'm feeling has definitely helped me.
I've been struggling, I've been stressed out. We're in a global pandemic. You don't have to be perfect.
Parents are also offered Ruler training to reinforce what their children learn at school.
First day out in over a month.
It's helping Jet and his family navigate the pandemic together.
As a male, I was kind of raised to not be emotional. These kids are being introduced at a young age, and they're able to define their feelings and their emotions. And it took me years of therapy to be able to say that.
What do you think parents could do a better job at in terms of talking to their kids about their emotions?
The best way to make teenagers feel comfortable opening up about their emotions is if you guys do the same. So I hope parents know that they can be vulnerable too.
We, as parents, don't have to have all the answers. We just have to be compassionate. We have to ask the questions and guide our children.
Dr. Tara Narula joins us now. Tara, this is such a great idea. I love what Jet's parents said. So many people are raised not to express their emotions. So what can parents do? Isn't it hard for them to sometimes know if their kids are struggling, and what can they do about that?
Absolutely, Gail, and it's so important. And we spoke to Dr. Brackett about that, who you saw in the piece, and there were a couple things he recommended. The first is really being a role model for your kids, that even when you think they're not listening and watching you, they are. They're seeing how you react to your anxieties, your stresses, your fears, and your mistakes. So you can be vulnerable, but you can also teach them strategies that are healthy to deal with their feelings. The second is, as he said, don't assume what your child is feeling. Behavior does not equal emotion. So just because your child looks calm doesn't mean they may be feeling that way. Just because your child storms out of the room and says, "I hate you, Mom," it may be that they're not really angry. Maybe they're disappointed at a failure that happened at school. Maybe they had a fight with their friend. So really important to sit down, talk to your kid, ask them how they're feeling, and listen to what they have to say.
So important. Thank you, Tara.
What a great piece. A lot of takeaways from that piece. So one of the things that we know, in the midst of difficulty, there lies opportunity. A very wise man said that, Albert Einstein. And so what are the opportunities that we have in the midst of these various pandemics we're living? The first is learning something about yourself. So take a minute now, think about it. Turn your attention to yourself. What have you learned about yourself in the last 7-8 months of this pandemic? What have you learned about yourself? Or if it hasn't been something new, what's been reinforced for you? Something you know about yourself. So something new you learned, something that has been reinforced. I learned that I matter. I enjoy the simple things. The extraordinary seems ordinary now. How could these things happen? And yet they're ordinary every day. And the ordinary things, like sitting down with your friend and having a cup of coffee, or sitting snuggling close to someone, seems extraordinary. Holding someone's hand, it's extraordinary, right? Silence is as important as noise. Enjoying the simple things, yes. It's a provocative question. So I invite you to just continue to think about it. What are those things that you continue to learn about yourself during this time of difficulty, wherein lies opportunity? So I'm going to give it over to Elisa now. And Elisa, tell us more about the other opportunities.
Absolutely. So other than learning about yourself, which Robin just talked about, we can consider that there are opportunities to create deeper bonds as families, to encourage greater family well-being and resilience, both for ourselves and for our children, to model skillful ways to work with stress, anxiety, and other strong emotions, and to collaborate more closely with educators. And we'll spend a little bit of time talking about each of these today. And we'll start with creating closer bonds. Many families, my own included, would say that they want to have close relationships, strong connections with each other. It is so hard to balance that family time with all of the other demands that we have in our lives, and that has gotten even more complicated. But what we do know is that weathering tough times and adversity together as a family can bring us closer. So how can we lean into those relationships that we have in our family and come out with closer connections? Something that we say, and you've heard a couple of times now, is give each other permission to feel. And that's a phrase that we use often at the center. And what we mean by that is that we acknowledge all emotions, the uncomfortable ones, the joyful ones. We check in with ourselves and our children, and we let it be okay to feel those uncomfortable feelings, to sit in those if we need to, or to move away from them if we want to. Even if we can't change a situation or solve a problem, most everyone wants to know that their feelings are heard, they're understood, and they're considered valid. And that doesn't mean that anything goes in terms of what we do with our emotions. We can learn to make helpful choices in how we express them, and that has a lot to do with regulating and the strategies we use to manage our emotions, which we can model and teach to our children. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But a point I want to make here, and something that I think is easy to forget in its simplicity, is to join each other in those really beautiful and happy moments. This is positive empathy, and there's a lot of research on really joining each other in those moments of success and laughter and happiness. And the research shows that this supports not only how close we feel to each other, but also our individual resilience and well-being. And the last thing I'll mention on this slide before we move on is storytelling. Family storytelling is something that is really resonates with me. My parents and their extended family moved to America from Italy, and I lived with my grandmother until I was 16. We actually shared a room together. So evenings were a time where I would hear stories about her life in Italy. And this was something that really brought us close together. And so through those stories, I was able to consider wider perspectives, to learn lessons through experience that I didn't have to learn the hard way, to really get to know a different layer of my grandmother. And with our children, when we share the highs and the lows, the good and the bad, it shows that we have identities outside of our roles as parents, that we are vulnerable too, that we can be open. And as we heard in the video, that is one of the best ways in supporting our children and being open with us. Many families have a lot more time together right now, and perhaps in close proximity. And that can be great. It can be time to cook together, to play games, or to spend time outside. However, it's important to balance that with time as individuals, to have those designated times for individual self-reflection or quiet time. We've always talked about this as alone time in my house, and this is like our sacred time that we identify, that we intentionally say that we need, and for how long we need it, so that we can kind of regroup and recharge individually. But consider what helps each family member feel connected. Is it a hug? Is it a meal together? Is it something tangible like a gift? This may remind you of the 5 love languages, which is really popular, and you can find out more information about that online if you're interested. But one way to start is simply by asking your children and your family members, what helps you feel close to me? Is it spending time together? Is it a conversation? Is it a compliment or a hug? And the last point I'll make about this topic is that these are hard times. It's really hard right now. Emotions are running high, and there will be times where our emotions get the better of us. There's nothing lost in apologizing. And I read this really wonderful article written by our very own Dr. Diana DeVita, and she writes about repair and relationships. And what she explains is that there's love in repair. It communicates that we value that relationship. And this is a skill that's so valuable to model for our children. It shows that we preserve our relationships with care and mutual respect. So we'll move on to talk a little bit about some strategies we can use during those intense times. So these are really short-term, in-the-moment strategies that you can use. And I'll say, before I go into any of these in any detail, that what works for one person isn't going to work for everyone. There is no universal correct strategy. It's about exploring what's going to work for us, what we're going to model for our children, what we're going to help them practice for themselves. Deep breathing sounds so simple, but in those really hot and intense times, it takes a lot of thought and it takes a lot of effort. But this is something that can right away start to slow our heart rate, to promote greater clarity in our thinking, and to just lower our emotional temperature. Positive self-talk is something that I know many of us, myself included, could be better at. Negative self-talk becomes kind of reflexive and automatic. My go-to is, I'm terrible at this. I suck. When's the last time we told ourselves something really positive and encouragement? When's the last time we told ourselves, I'm a good parent. I'm doing a good job. Harsh self-criticism has rarely been helpful. And when we show ourselves that kindness, it's more supportive. Positive reframing is about telling ourselves a different story about our circumstances, about ourselves in a way that changes the meaning for us and helps us to manage those emotions. It doesn't mean we're denying or sugarcoating the circumstances. It means we're acknowledging how we're feeling, but we're widening our perspective. So we can ask ourselves, what's one way we can look at this a little differently? We may need to move, to dance, to walk, to take a break and do something else, or think of something funny or a happy memory. Distracting ourselves just for a moment can be helpful so we can kind of regroup and decide what steps to take next. And I was talking to Erin even before this webinar. Music is such a powerful tool for me. It's something that really resonates and can be something that quickly starts to shift my mood. Art and other forms of expression may be helpful in that way for you as well. These are some more long-term strategies, things that we build into our lives that really help us be present and be our best selves as parents. The first one we had mentioned in a couple of slides and has come up, I'm sure, before. Establishing routines for our own self-care is so important. It's easy to say that we don't have time to eat enough food, to get enough sleep, to exercise, but this is what gives us the resources to show up in the ways that we want to show up for our kids and in our lives. There's great research on the positive influence of time in nature on our resilience and well-being. And also, we can't do it on our own sometimes. So lean on those social supports. Surround yourselves with positive relationships with friends, families, and coworkers. Being connected is healing. Listen, talk to others. Practicing generosity and service can be a way that we can find some agency and control in a time that so much is unpredictable. And it also is a great model for our children of how we can be in the world. And I'll take a breath before I talk about this one because I think that it's kind of personal to me. I feel like I'm speaking as much to myself as to everyone here as well. And these are some, again, long-term strategies, but these are more about stable outlooks and ways we look at the world. And the first one, self-compassion, is something that I feel particularly compelled by, probably because this is something that I work on daily. And that is, life is challenging. There's going to be stressful situations. There's going to be things that go well, and there's going to be things that don't. But we all do the best that we can in all aspects of our lives. When we realize something that we don't like about ourselves or we don't live up to our own expectations, we can show self-compassion by offering ourselves the same kindness and understanding that we would to a dear friend, that we would to the people that we love the most. And this is something that I'm really trying to encourage with my own friends, and that I really worked on with children that I worked with in schools, was just asking them, in moments where they're being really harsh or critical of themselves, what would you say to your best friend if he or she was in your shoes at this time? Make meaning. We're going to move through this time of multiple pandemics with that in the background. What's the meaning we can take away from it? What lessons are we learning? What's one thing we can be hopeful about? The stories that we tell ourselves about this time are what really promote our resilience. Is this a time that we learn something about ourselves, that we reconsidered our priorities, for example? As I mentioned, we're all balancing so many different demands. So how are we reconsidering what's really important, what matters on a day-to-day basis? And I'll ask you, what's one way that you're reconsidering your priorities have you reconsidered? And what does that look like for you? And I don't know that I can see the chat, so Robin, are you able to see what the responses are?
So I think people are thinking about that. How have people reconsidered their priorities? I'll speak for myself. I think that I realized how wonderful it is actually to have dinner with my husband every night. And I did not make that a priority. So that is definitely a new priority for me. Let's see what other people have to say.
We do have Catherine that mentioned her work boundaries.
Made it a priority to get outside. Oh my goodness, how wonderful is that? Yeah, to get outside. Dinner with my children, hiking, teaching my daughters to cook. More time with their children. A slower pace. Yes, a slower pace was needed. This is the universe's way of saying, take a pause. As a family. Time for myself. Family board games. Conversations with my kids. Wonderful. Practicing gratitude. Taking naps after remote classes. Love that. These are wonderful. Thank you. Keep them coming. Keep thinking about it for yourself. And Elise, I love the point you made about making meaning. You know, when I years ago worked with survivors of 9/11, it was the way they told the story that kind of set their course in restoring their lives and in moving through it with more resilience. You know, was it a time that, while horrific, they were able to learn that they had strength? Was it a time where they look back and they say it was just horrible and they learned nothing? And where are those people emotionally, psychologically, given what they're saying to themselves? So making meaning in a way that can move you forward can be wonderful.
Okay. Well, Elisa described so many effective strategies. And for me, mindfulness has been a fantastic strategy for well-being. I first learned about it when I was in my early 20s, and it immediately impacted my life in a positive way and gave me a new perspective. So in the CBS newsreel that we just watched about Ruler, there was a young boy who was leading a mindfulness practice that's called loving kindness. But what's wonderful is that when our minds are racing, mindfulness can really bring us back into the present moment. It can deepen our self-awareness, and it can clarify how connected we all really are. So most people just begin with a basic practice that has some kind of anchor, like the breath, or maybe it's just feeling the various sensations that move through our bodies, or listening to sounds and just as they just pass through. And if you learn a basic practice and you teach it to your children, you are equipping them with a powerful tool for a lifetime. It can really rewire your brain from the inside out. So, and this can lead to greater well-being. So many families just find the basic focusing practice can be useful, like if they're feeling scattered or anxious, or they just want to check in with themselves and find out what is really going on in my heart and mind right now. So over time, the practice can deepen and become more subtle and cultivate a lot of inner strengths. So just, we'll send you some of our favorite apps so that you'll have the links to those if you're interested. But if you wanted to start tomorrow, for example, just the basics are that you can just, you can be in any position. You can sit, lie, or stand. Focus on your breath, just breathing naturally, not trying to change anything. And just follow your in and out breath. And then when your mind wanders, you gently bring it back without judging yourself. Back to what Elisa talked about, just self-compassion. Everybody's mind wanders. And if you did a daily practice like this with your kids every morning before school, I think you'd begin to see and feel the benefits pretty quickly for both of you. So I hope that some of you will try that, and I'm sure many of you already do. So parents have always been children's first and most enduring teachers. And sometimes we're teaching lessons that we don't even know. So we're teaching kids about our own beliefs, about emotions, and often just by how we're managing our own. And Robin, you had a really funny story about this.
So when my daughter was little, I remember going upstairs to her bedroom and seeing her talk to her stuffed animals, and she must have been like 4 years old or something, and she was standing there with her hands on her hips, and she was saying to her stuffed animals, "I told you, you're hungry, not tired. I told you, you're hungry, not tired, or you're not tired, you're hungry," or one of those things. And I have expertise in this field, right? But I still said the wrong thing to her in the supermarket when she was wanting to have some of her cut up veggies, and I said, "You're not hungry, you're tired." So that's actually, don't know what I said a couple of minutes ago, but that's what she was saying to her stuffed animals. And so I was teaching her something inadvertently that I didn't want her to learn. I want my children to learn. Now she's 30 years old, and I think she learned it on her own, maybe a little bit from me and hanging out with some of my friends like Catherine and Elisa, who teach their children, hopefully, that they can have whatever feelings they want, and whatever feelings they have are their authentic feelings, right? And who am I to tell them that they're not feeling one thing, but rather feeling something else? And yet that is what she took away from that moment. So they're watching you. Your children are watching you.
So, so we'd like to explore a little bit more about social and emotional learning, and then just school learning, because now, of course, so many families are finding that not only are they working with all the responsibilities that they once had, but now they're also needing to take over a lot of the academic learning, or just play a much larger supportive role. So what we wanted to make very, very clear is that learning is social emotional. We talk about social and emotional learning sometimes as if it was something separate, but it's not as though emotions have a location right here in the brain and then learning is somewhere else in the brain. It's just that that our emotions are intertwined with everything that we do and everything that we learn, like the strands of a rope. And also that learning isn't like opening up the top of your head and then just, pouring in the information. One teacher said it so well, "I don't teach math, I teach Johnny math. I teach Brenda math." So we're engaging with complex human beings, even if there are these little beings who are our children, and that takes complex understanding. So when we say learning is social and emotional, that also implies that how we feel about ourselves as learners impacts our ability to learn. I once had years ago, so long ago, I taught kindergarten, and a boy came to the class from another school, and he was repeating kindergarten, and he just had a very negative, unhappy way of being with the group. And so I spent quite a bit of time trying to unpack this with his parents, who finally discovered that when nobody was around, his older sister was telling him that he was dumb and that he'd flunked kindergarten. So there's a quote that we love that says, "How we talk to our children becomes their inner voice." In this case, it was his sister that was saying these things to him, and that had become his inner voice. Go to the next slide. So we'd like to talk a little bit about what great teachers know, and a lot of the teachers who've been through ruler training, what they know, since you're now collaborating with them more closely. And so based upon both the research and the conversations with teachers in rural schools. One of the key goals and skills that teachers have, especially in the beginning of the year, is to build warm, trusting, and respectful relationships. And your relationship, your love for your child is the most important ingredient to being a great teacher. So in other words, you're already your children's most powerful teacher. And that just sort of goes back to Robin's story, you know, that we're teaching whether we're aware of it or not. But given that awareness, I would just like for us to consider for a few minutes those feelings of connectedness. Because we love our children, but we don't necessarily always feel as connected as we might. So before jumping into the school day, for example, let's say they're doing it at home. Are you and your child feeling positively connected? Did something happen where you snapped at them maybe in the morning? And is there any repair work that needs to happen before they start their day? Because when you're in sync with one another, this facilitates great learning. And where there's this connection, this also affects learning in a negative way. And also offer help, but don't force it unless there's a serious problem that needs intervention. And offer wisdom, but don't force it. For example, you might say, I have an idea about that. Can I run it by you? Or is there a way that I can help? Because we want kids to learn to make decisions for themselves, and this actually builds self-confidence. And of course they need structure, but they need that balance with learning gradually how to run their own lives. So express your confidence in their ability to make sound decisions. That's the next slide. So great teachers put ideas into action. We learn by doing, by interacting with ideas, with other people, with our environment, and we construct our knowledge and understanding through these interactions. So since so many of you are taking on that teacher role, here's a little bit more. There's a few tips about connecting learning to the real world. So one, build on your child's interests and passions. Last night I watched this documentary, maybe some of you have seen it, My Octopus Teacher. And I thought so many subjects could be connected back to that film. Ocean science and water, telling a story through writing and video, the relationships between human beings or humans and animals, the life cycle. So school is often divided into these narrow, discrete kinds of disciplines. Whereas life is generally, and learning and what we do out in the world is definitely more interconnected. So we need to learn the competencies of those disciplines, but also how learning certain skills can bring us closer to what we care about. I once had a second grade student who thought he couldn't write. He wouldn't try writing. And so I found out that he was a big baseball fan, and I found out who his favorite player was. And so we wrote him some fan mail. And that was something that he cared about, and it made a real difference in his motivation. So when you make connections between the things your kids need to learn and their vital concerns, that can really help. Another kind of real world learning has to do with making connections between ideas and how things work. So for example, for many kids, and I just saw this so often over the years, a lot of learning can feel too abstract, or maybe it's being taught to them before they're really ready for those abstract ideas. But often these same kids will learn and benefit by understanding more about the direct application of this learning. So like, how does geometry relate to the tile in the kitchen, or designing a house, or designing a garden, or slicing a pie, in a way that's fair? How does emotional attunement and perspective taking help with being a team player in sports, or collaborating on a project? So teachers, parents, and caregivers who do this can really make a critical difference in children's learning. I had a student in middle school who really had some academic challenges, and we went to work in a preschool classroom, and she was a genius. The little kids loved her, and everybody got to see her shine in that in a different kind of context. And then third, I'd say give learning a sense of agency and power. So for example, how can you use writing and music and art and technology as a tool to create change or to fight injustice? So even kindergartners can fight for justice, as mine once did, to save the big trees in a local park. So if you want your kids to be interested, be interesting and notice opportunities for learning everywhere. This is the next slide, thank you. So what great teachers know? Great teachers create positive emotional climates that set the stage for learning. So if you're connecting learning to the real world, if you're finding some originality in how you're approaching learning, if you're feeling connected to one another in your relationships, then you're on your way to creating a positive emotional climate. But remember, as adults, you are the leaders and you set the tone. So how you feel and regulate your emotions has a tremendous impact on the emotional climate in your home. And also remember that emotions are contagious. So your emotions, all of our emotions affect other people, and your emotions affect your children just as their emotions are affecting you. So Robin talked about the opportunities in our current situation, and I'd say this really is an opportunity to understand the impact of our emotions on other people. Just being in these closed-up spaces with one another for so long, it really is an opportunity to explore that and have conversations about it in your family. Talk about feelings, you know, how you're regulating them and the kind of climate that you're creating together. And before I just go on, I just want to add one word about encouragement, because this is something that I care deeply about. Many parents, even loving parents, are in the habit of giving criticism for good reason, because they think it will help. But the science tells it differently, and that harsh criticism especially can be withering, just withering for children. I remember as a teacher hearing a parent say in front of their child that she was lazy and unmotivated. And I saw the angry, hurt, and defeated expression on the daughter's face. So we're born natural learners. If your child doesn't want to learn, then something is getting in the way. Something's going on. Maybe he feels discouraged, or maybe she has an undiagnosed learning difference. Maybe the topic seems uninteresting and needs to be brought more to life. But be encouraging and be curious and try to understand why your child feels the way they're feeling, and refrain from criticism. I love this guy named Carl Rogers, who was a humanistic psychologist. I just can't stop talking about him these days. But he talks about unconditional positive regard, which involves expressing empathy, support, and acceptance to someone, regardless of what they say or do. And it doesn't mean that anything goes, but your unconditional positive regard for your children helps them reach their highest potential. So kids want to work hard, and it's the teacher, in this case it's you, can make learning fun and more possible. And when you create the emotional climate that's best for learning, it really helps make that happen.
And just by the way, that works for other family members too. When you approach people with, as an emotion scientist, with positive regard, with curiosity, with an invitation to be themselves, people are likely to open up and flourish.
Yep. And your friends and your extended family.
And your friends. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, let's look at the mood meter. So just quickly, the mood meter, this is the mood meter. You saw a version of it on the CBS News. And so it's just a chance, if you don't know about it yet, you will. I'm not going to take the time really to explain it, but this is a key tool that we use with Ruler to help with self-awareness and really all of the Ruler's skills. So what emotions are you bringing into the room? And where does your child need to be in order to tackle that math problem or read that historical piece? So great teachers know about what we call mood congruent instruction. And we're going to show you a brief video about it.
Each quadrant of the mood meter is associated with different kinds of thinking and learning activities. When students are in the yellow, they may experience emotions that promote creative thinking and the generation of new ideas. Brainstorming, energetic group activities, and creative problem solving are best done in the yellow. When students are in the red, they may experience emotions that heighten awareness and keep students on their toes. The red is good for competitive activities, like debating, or passionate expression, like promoting a cause. When students are in the blue, they may experience emotions that help them focus for deductive reasoning and critical thinking. In addition, the blue emotions prime students to relate well to others' misfortune, building empathy. The blue promotes success for tasks like proofreading, editing, and detailed analysis. When students are in the green, they may experience emotions that promote self-reflection and consensus building. Students feel comfortable, relaxed, and calm. Activities that involve collaboration are ideal for the green. The best teachers differentiate instruction using the mood meter and capitalize on all quadrants, knowing that all emotions matter.
So Catherine talked about what great teachers know about emotions and learning and how you can leverage that knowledge and emotions to support your children. I'm going to go a little bit more specifically into some tips that you can use to reduce the stress of distance learning, which is something that came up in a number of the questions and comments that we received with the registration. As Catherine mentioned, emotions are contagious. So check in with yourself first. Is that the emotional space that we want to bring our children into for learning, or something different? Explore the strategies that work for you, model those strategies, and support your children in learning and trying strategies of their own. Be proactive. Perhaps you start with a mindfulness practice, as Catherine mentioned. Maybe you have a list of calming strategies that you display in the home somewhere where everyone can see them, so that you can use them or have them on hand before you need them, or in anticipation of a challenging time of day or a challenging type of activity. I mentioned we're really big into music, so we have our Pump Up, Get Amped Up for the Day playlist and our Chill playlist. And we know where to go to find that information. Collaborate and co-create a schedule and structure that works for you and for your children. It may not go exactly as you plan it every day, and that's okay. Every day is an opportunity to fine-tune, adjust, and try something new. It's this delicate balance of flexibility and stability. And again, every day is an opportunity to learn what might work best. Set realistic expectations. It's not possible to recreate school at home. The main goal is to offer that unconditional positive regard, to help our child feel safe and do their best in the schoolwork that we're doing at home. It's our encouragement that matters. We don't have to know all of the answers. So we got a lot more comments on kind of time management and screen time, and that could be a whole other webinar. So I'm going to try to summarize some of that information in these first couple bullet points, and then we'll share some other resources following the webinar. But teaching about the science of procrastination and what that does in our brains and bodies can be really helpful. The author of the book, Screenagers, talks about the physiological process of procrastination. She explains that the brain actually experiences physical pain when it thinks of doing work that it doesn't want to do. And that's why there's such a sense and feeling of relief when we avoid that work. But that pain goes away minutes into beginning that task. So something we can try with our children, in addition to kind of explaining the reason for that, which can be helpful, is just have them rate on a scale of 0 to 10, how much they're dreading a particular task, with 0 being fine, I'm excited about it, and 10 being this is torture. And then see if that level of dread goes down a few minutes into the work. And that can be something that can help students kind of get over that initial hump of starting. But we want to be curious and explore every kind of instance of procrastination, because we know that behaviors are not emotions, and there could be many reasons and many things driving avoidance of particular tasks. I also want to acknowledge that establishing helpful screen time when we rely on technology for work and school and social life sometimes is so challenging. And we've always had kind of limits and structure around screen time in my house. And those structures and my expectations and my understanding about what was healthy screen time habits was kind of at odds with what we then needed to do to kind of navigate and work in this time that was so different. So I want to acknowledge that and say that the key takeaway is that we do the best that we can with this. We focus on small and concrete things that we can implement in our homes to create boundary and structure around technology. Some families have, a tech curfew where all the devices are away for the night. Some families have a docking station for this is our no tech time. Other families have no phones at the dinner table. So whatever it is, what small kind of boundaries and structures you create is great. We just have to do something to create that space. Time management is another big topic, but I will say that for some children, it can be really helpful to make time external and concrete. So think old-fashioned kitchen timers or stand timers to show that passage of time. Think making lists and estimating how long certain tasks will take. Setting goals for sustained amount of time working on a particular task. That can be helpful, so long as we're not putting additional pressures of completion within a time frame, which can be then unhelpful. But a key component is empathize. During those meltdowns, those times of frustration and stress, those challenging behaviors are communicating an emotional need that's not being met. The time to teach behavior expectations is never in those hot moments. So how can we calm ourselves? First, I know that I'm triggered when I'm seeing my toddler or my first grader meltdown, but how can I take that deep breath for myself and respond with compassion? Because they're not giving me a hard time, they're having a hard time themselves. And the last piece is keeping close communication with school. I am keenly aware of our time, and so we're not going to dive too deeply into this one. We will send a tip sheet with some specific strategies and tips and helpful suggestions around this following the webinar. But the takeaway is share what you need to share about what's going on at home, what it looks like at home, what you're seeing, ask what you need to ask, partner around supporting children and find solutions together with the educators at your school.
So parenting is a big job, and we scratched the surface of some really major topics tonight and gave you some specific strategies to help you with stress and navigating this very difficult time, to teach you a little bit about Ruler in the interstitial moments of the presentation, to talk about well-being and what's family well-being and how to build relationships and how to navigate virtual learning. There's so much more, and we hope to see you again in another webinar. But just to capture something for yourself from tonight, there are many communities around the country that greet each other by saying, "What's learning you right now?" So what was learning you tonight? Meaning, what did you learn? What are you taking away from this webinar with you? What's learning you right now? What's learning you as a parent? What's learning you as a role model? Differentiating with the mood meter. Taking a pause, respond, don't react. Starting the day with mindfulness. Reflect on your day with your kids. Acknowledge your emotions. Be kind to yourself. Set the emotional climate as parents. How I speak becomes the voice my children will hear. Wanting to learn more, the importance of mindfulness. Unconditional positive regard. Acknowledge emotions. Start with the permission to feel. Be patient. Be patient. We could all end with that. Be patient.
Be mindful of criticisms.
Be mindful. Mindful to encourage. Greet them with joy each morning. Wonderful. Today is a new day. Be happy. Well, that's a great place to stop. So we are so happy that you chose to spend this time with us, and that we are here with you. And hopefully there are many things that you can reflect on walking away from tonight's webinar. And we will, as we said, follow up with a tip sheet and with resources. And we'd love to hear from you with what more we can do to help you. What else you would like to see, what else you'd like to hear about. Thank you so much on behalf of all of us. Catherine, Elisa, anything last word?
No, just really appreciate that you took the time out on your evening to spend with us. So thank you.
It's been really amazing hearing what the chats and the contributions have been, because those have been such valuable perspectives and reminders and insights, and I learned a lot.
Yep, and helps us feel connected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really wonderful to connect with you, even though you're out there somewhere. We don't even know where, but we're hearing from you, and that matters. So thank you very much for giving yourselves to us.
Thanks.
Good night.
Night.
Take care, everyone. Good night.